The rain was coming down in heavy sheets that evening, turning the streets into small rivers. Alenia Stravel stood under her umbrella, balancing a basket with freshly baked bread she had made for her son, Tavrin. It was his favorite, soft, warm, and made just the way he loved when he was a boy. She smiled to herself as she walked up the porch steps. Tonight, she thought, would be special. She rang the doorbell and waited, raindrops splashing on her shoes. A moment later, the door opened, but it wasn't Tavrin. It was his wife, Saren Calith. Her arms were crossed, her expression sharp. "What are you doing here?" Saren asked, her voice flat. Alenia blinked, confused. I brought some bread for Tavrin. I wanted to surprise him. I thought we could all have dinner together." Saren glanced over her shoulder into the house, then back at Alenia. Her lips curled into a bitter smile. "You can't just show up here whenever you feel like it. This is my house. You don't belong here." The words cut deep. Before Alenia could respond, Saren stepped back and slammed the door shut, right in her face. The lock clicked loudly, like an exclamation mark on her humiliation. For a moment, Alenia just stood there frozen. The rain beat down harder, soaking her umbrella until it dripped along the edges. She knocked gently, hoping Tavrin would come. "Tavrin?" she called softly, but there was no answer. Through the window, she could see shadows moving inside. She caught a glimpse of Tavrin sitting at the table, his head lowered, avoiding her gaze. Beside him were Aldrich and Maricel Calith, Saren's parents. They were laughing at something, their voices carrying through the glass. Alenia's chest ached. She knocked again, louder this time. "Tavrin, please." Still, he didn't move. The wind picked up, blowing the rain sideways. Alenia lowered her umbrella to shield the basket, desperate to keep the bread from getting ruined. Water ran down her hair and face, her clothes sticking to her skin. She looked around. A couple of neighbors were watching from their windows. She could see them whispering to each other. Humiliation burned hotter than the cold. She wanted to leave, but her feet wouldn't move. How could she walk away when her own son sat just a few feet away, refusing to open the door? Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Every second that passed made the sting sharper. She started shivering, her hands numb, but still she waited. Maybe Tavrin just needed time. Maybe he would open the door. But the door stayed closed. Inside, she heard a burst of laughter, Saren's voice loud and mocking. Alenia's eyes stung with tears. She felt small, like she was intruding in a place she used to feel welcome. Her thoughts raced. Did I do something wrong? Did I upset them somehow? She replayed every conversation she'd had with Saren in her mind, searching for a reason for this sudden cruelty. Her breath came out shaky. The bread was no longer warm. Her heart felt just as cold as her fingers. Finally, she turned toward the steps. She couldn't stand there forever. She took one slow step down, telling herself she would go home, dry off, and maybe call Tavrin tomorrow. But just as she reached the bottom step, bright headlights cut through the rain. A car pulled up in front of the house and stopped. It was Corrick Halden. He stepped out of the car, holding his jacket over his head. But when he saw his wife standing there in the rain, drenched and pale, he froze. "Alenia," he called, his voice filled with alarm. She turned to him, her lips trembling. They wouldn't let me in," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. Corrick's face darkened. The rain didn't matter to him anymore. He dropped the jacket onto the wet ground and climbed the porch steps in long, angry strides. Inside the house, the laughter died down as they heard the heavy thud of his boots on the wooden steps. Corrick reached the door and pounded it with his fist. The sound was so loud that even the neighbors turned to look. This time, someone would have to answer. The pounding on the door echoed through the whole house. Everyone inside froze. The laughter that had filled the living room moments ago vanished, as if the rain outside had swallowed it. Tavrin Drossic glanced at Saren Calith, his wife. Her face tightened, her lips pressed into a thin line. She knew exactly who was at the door. Corrick Halden's voice thundered through the wood. "Open this door. Right now." Tavrin's hands trembled slightly as he stood. He walked toward the entrance, his steps hesitant, like a man caught between two storms. When he pulled the door open just a crack, rain blew in and splashed his shirt. Corrick stood there, water dripping from his hair, his jaw clenched with fury. "Why is your mother standing in the rain?" Corrick demanded. Tavrin lowered his eyes, unable to answer. "It's complicated," he muttered. "Complicated?" Corrick shoved the door wide open and stepped inside, his heavy boots leaving muddy prints on the floor. "You left her outside like a beggar." From the porch, Alenia still stood, clutching her soaked basket of bread, too stunned to move. Her heart pounded as she watched her husband storm into their son's home. She had never seen him this angry. Inside, Saren crossed her arms and tried to keep her voice steady. She can't just come here whenever she wants. This is my house. We need space. Korik turned to her slowly, his eyes blazing. Your house. His voice was calm but dangerous. Do you even know who made this house possible? Who helped with the down payment when you and my son couldn't afford it? The room went silent. Aldrich and Maricel Calith, Saren's parents, exchanged uncomfortable glances. They hadn't known. It was me, Korik said, his voice cutting like steel. I worked for years to give my son a start. And you dare lock my wife out in the rain? While my son sits here and says nothing. Tavern's stomach churned. He felt small under his father's glare. He wanted to defend Saren, but the image of his mother shivering outside burned in his mind. His silence weighed heavier than any words he could have spoken. Saren's face flushed red. We didn't ask for her to come. She interferes too much. Enough! Korik's shout made her flinch. He stepped closer, his broad frame towering over the room. Alenia has given nothing but love to this family. She baked bread for her son, and you treated her like a stray dog. And you, he turned to Tavern, his voice breaking with disappointment, you let it happen. The words hit Tavern like a blade. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Outside, Alenia finally stepped in, her eyes wide. Water dripped from her clothes, forming a small puddle on the floor. She didn't speak, didn't defend herself. She only looked at her son, waiting for him to choose, his silence or his mother. Maricel Calith shifted uncomfortably on the couch. She whispered to her husband, "This has gone too far." Aldrich nodded, his jaw tight. Even they, proud as they were, could see the cruelty. Korik's voice softened, but the anger still burned beneath it. Family is not about shutting doors. It's about opening them. If my wife is not welcome here, then neither am I. And if that is the case, Tavern, perhaps this house should no longer carry my name in its foundation. The words hung heavy in the air, like thunder waiting to strike. Tavern's chest tightened. He looked at his mother, her shoulders trembling, her hands clutching the ruined bread. He looked at his father, standing tall, drenched but unbroken. Then he looked at Saren, whose pride burned so bright it blinded her to the pain she caused. His heart twisted. He could no longer stay silent. "Father," Tavern finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "Bring her in, please." Alenia's lips parted, tears filling her eyes. Korik guided her forward, wrapping his coat around her trembling shoulders. She stepped inside at last, though she felt the weight of every gaze in the room. Saren turned away sharply, her jaw clenched, but her parents didn't support her. Aldrich muttered under his breath, "This is shameful." Alenia's eyes darted to her son. "Tavern," she whispered, her voice breaking, "why didn't you open the door?" The question pierced him deeper than his father's anger. He couldn't answer. His silence had already spoken for him. And in that silence, everyone realized the storm outside wasn't nearly as fierce as the storm brewing within this family. The living room was so quiet that only the sound of rain against the windows could be heard. Alenia stood just inside the doorway, her wet clothes dripping onto the floor. Korik stood beside her, tall and firm, his presence filling the room with an energy no one could ignore. Tavern stayed frozen, his head lowered, shame written across his face. Saren, on the other hand, refused to back down. She lifted her chin, her voice sharp. "She interferes in our life too much," Saren said coldly, pointing toward Alenia. "Always showing up, always telling Tavern what to do. This is my home now. She needs to respect that." Korik's eyes narrowed. "Respect?" he repeated, his voice low but dangerous. He took a step forward, his wet boots squeaking against the floor. "Do you think leaving a woman, your husband's mother, out in the storm is respect? Do you think humiliating her in front of neighbors is respect?" Saren's throat tightened. She looked away, but her pride kept her from admitting she was wrong. Korik's voice grew louder, shaking the silence. "No, what you did tonight is cruelty. And worse than that, my son allowed it." Tavern flinched at the words. He had no excuse. His silence had already betrayed his mother. Aldrich Calith cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. "Korik, maybe." "No, Aldrich," Korik cut him off. His voice rose, filled with the kind of fury that made even strong men shrink. "You sat here, in my son's house, while my wife was treated like dirt outside. You laughed while she stood in the rain. And you call yourself parents." Maricel Calith lowered her eyes, unable to meet his gaze. Shame flickered on her face. Saren's lips trembled, but she fired back anyway. We didn't know she was still outside. We thought she left. Cork's laugh was bitter and sharp. You knew. You all knew. His voice thundered. And yet, no one opened the door. The weight of his words pressed down on everyone in the room. Alenia stayed quiet, her heart aching as she watched the storm unravel her family from the inside. Then Cork's voice dropped low, each word striking like a hammer. This house you are so proud of? The one you claim is yours, Saren? It would not exist without me. I gave Tavern the money to buy it. My sweat, my years of work, my savings built these walls. The room froze. Aldrich's eyes widened. Maricel gasped. Even Tavern looked up, shocked. Saren's face turned pale. What are you saying? She whispered. I am saying, Cork growled, that this house carries my name, my sacrifice. And if my wife is not welcome here, then neither am I. And if neither of us are welcome, then perhaps this house should no longer belong to Tavern at all. The air grew heavy. Saren staggered back, her pride cracking like thin glass. Her parents looked at her with disappointment. The laughter and smugness they had carried earlier were gone, replaced by silence and unease. Alenia's chest tightened. She didn't want the family to break apart like this, but she also couldn't stop her husband's words. He had been pushed too far. Tavern stepped forward at last. His voice shook as he said, Father, don't say that. Please. He turned to his mother, his eyes full of guilt. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have opened the door. I should have stood up for you. The words made Alenia's tears spill over. Her son's apology healed a small part of the wound, but the pain of his earlier silence still lingered. Saren clenched her fists. So now it's all my fault? She snapped, her voice rising. I'm the villain? She's the perfect saint, and I'm the cruel wife. Cork's glare cut through her like lightning. This isn't about blame. This is about what's right. A man who forgets his parents forgets himself. And a woman who cannot respect her husband's mother will destroy her own marriage. The words struck deep. Saren's face twisted, but her voice faltered. Even her parents remained silent, no longer defending her. Alenia finally spoke, her voice soft but filled with pain. Saren, I never came here to take your place. I only wanted to be part of my son's life. That is all. The room fell still again. Rain pounded outside, but inside the storm had shifted. It wasn't just anger now. It was a reckoning. Tavern looked between his mother and his wife. His heart raced as he realized he couldn't stand in the middle anymore. A choice was coming, and it would change everything. The storm outside was loud, but the storm inside the house was louder. No one moved. The air was heavy with tension. Alenia stood with her soaked basket pressed against her chest, her eyes red from tears. Cork stood firm beside her, his jaw tight. Saren glared at them both, her pride burning like fire. And Tavern, he stood in the middle, his heart tearing in two. Cork's voice cut through the silence. Tavern, look at your mother. Tell me, did she deserve this? To be locked out like a stranger? To be humiliated in front of neighbors? Tavern's lips parted, but no words came. His throat felt like it was closing. He had seen it all, his mother's gentle knock, her trembling hands, the neighbors whispering, but he had done nothing. That shame weighed heavier than stone. Say something, Cork thundered. Finally, Tavern's voice broke free, hoarse and trembling. No, she didn't deserve it. Alenia's breath caught. She looked at her son, tears spilling down her cheeks. She had waited the whole night for him to say those words. Saren scoffed, folding her arms. So that's it? She's the victim, and I'm the monster? You're going to let them turn you against me, Tavern? Her parents shifted uncomfortably. Maricel whispered, Saren, stop. Aldrich shook his head, his eyes filled with disappointment. But Saren's pride only grew. This is my home. I'm your wife. I should come first. Cork's eyes burned. A wife who destroys a man's bond with his mother will destroy him too. Tavern, you must decide. Will you stand with the woman who shamed your mother, or will you stand for what is right? The room seemed to shrink. Tavern's pulse pounded in his ears. His wife, his mother, his father, 3 different forces pulling at his heart. Then Alenia spoke, her voice breaking. Tavern, I don't want to come between you and Saren. I only wanted to bring you bread, to feel welcome in my son's home. If that was wrong, I'll never come again. Her words pierced everyone in the room. Even Saren flinched, though she quickly masked it with anger. Tavern's chest ached. He stepped forward slowly, his eyes locked on his mother. He took the ruined bread from her trembling hands and set it on the table. Then, without hesitation, he wrapped his arms around her. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I should have opened the door. I should have defended you. I will never let this happen again." Alenia clung to him, her tears wetting his shoulder. For the first time that night, her heart felt a little lighter. Korik exhaled, his fury easing just slightly. He placed a hand on Tavrin's shoulder. "That's my son." Saren's face twisted with disbelief. "So that's it? You're choosing her over me?" Tavrin turned to her, his eyes no longer weak but steady. "No, Saren. I'm choosing respect. If you can't respect my parents, then you can't respect me. This house, this marriage, it cannot survive without respect." The words hung heavy in the air. Saren's face went pale. Her parents looked at her with disapproval. Maricel shook her head, whispering, "He's right." Saren's pride finally cracked. Her eyes welled with tears, and for the first time that night her voice trembled. I didn't mean. I just wanted space. I felt like I was losing you." Alenia looked at her gently, even through her pain. "Saren, I never wanted to take him away from you. I only wanted to be part of your lives. That's all." The room went quiet again. Rain softened outside, like the storm itself was finally calming. Saren lowered her head, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry." Alenia's eyes widened. She hadn't expected it. Neither had Tavrin or Korik. But Saren finally broke the wall of pride that had poisoned the evening. Korik nodded firmly. "Words are a start, but actions matter more. Remember that." Saren wiped her eyes and looked at Alenia. "I'll do better. I don't want to lose my family." Tavrin took her hand gently, but his voice was clear. "Then prove it. Tonight was the last time something like this will ever happen." Saren nodded, silent but shaken. Her parents quietly excused themselves, leaving the four of them in the house together. Alenia sat down at the table, still trembling, but this time with relief rather than humiliation. Tavrin brought her a blanket, wrapping it around her shoulders. Korik placed the ruined bread on a plate, almost as if to honor the small act of love that had started this storm. For the first time that night, Alenia felt the warmth of her family again. The rain had washed away the pride, the silence, and the cruelty, leaving only truth behind. And though scars would remain, that night became the beginning of a new rule in Tavrin's home. Love without respect is nothing, and no door would ever be closed to Alenia again.